Joining. I'm here with my co-host Brian the Beast Robinson, and we have a very special guest today, Keith Strandberg, writer, producer of many martial art classics we've all seen growing up, including No Retreat, No Surrender 1, 2, and 3, King of the Kickboxers, Blood Moon, American Shaolin, so many great films. Keith, thanks so much for joining.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks very much.
And we got to give a shout out to our buddy Antonio, who's always coming with the great comments, the great questions. I believe his birthday was yesterday, so happy birthday, Antonio.
Happy birthday, brother.
Keith, Antonio is a great artist, by the way. He had painted that portrait of Brian behind him. I think
nice.
It does a great job of capturing his likeness. And he painted this for me.
Wow, that's
doing one of my jump kicks.
Wow.
And he's painted so many other great people. Antonio, I think you need to paint Keith, or at least a scene from one of his films. Maybe him even, on set of film, like No Retreat, No Surrender or something. That should be your next thing.
I make a cameo in every movie, which is for good or for bad, but I make a cameo in every movie. So I'm in the background at least.
So you're like Alfred Hitchcock then.
Who's the actor? What's his name? He wrote the comics there and stuff. He used to always do a cameo and was it the Avengers?
Oh, Stan Lee?
Yeah, Stan Lee.
Yeah, Stan Lee, that's right. So Stan Lee did it. Alfred Hitchcock was in all of his. So it's not at that level, but at least I'm in each of the movies.
Oh, I didn't know that. Where are you in No Retreat, No Surrender 1?
I'm in the bar fight where Jason saves his father in the parking lot of the bar. I'm one of the thugs that are attacking. And in fact, it was hard for me to live that down because on one of the kicks, I turned the wrong way. The stuntmen never let me forget that. So every time they'd see me, they'd go, "Oh, Keith, you turned the wrong way."
Oh, that's funny. Hey, let's talk about how you actually got involved with seasonal films and all these classic martial art movies that they produced.
Well, sure. I started martial arts when I was 13, I think. And so I really, really fell in love with the martial arts. And so my major in college started out as Oriental philosophy. And then I switched it to Chinese language because the language could get me everything, culture and literature and the philosophy, with a minor in philosophy. And then I went and I lived in Taiwan after I graduated. I lived there for a year to perfect my Chinese. And while I was there, I tried to contact some of the Hong Kong movie studios because I saw a bunch of bad Hong Kong movies and I thought I could make movies that were just as bad. So why not give that a try? And I was writing for a bunch of martial arts magazines, so I had gotten a bit of a name in the martial arts world as a writer. So then one of my first jobs was taking Americans to China because back in the 80s, you couldn't go to China by yourself. You had to go in a tour. So I was a tour leader. And one of the tours, I had a week in Hong Kong between tours. So I called up Golden Harvest and Shaw Brothers and all these guys, and they all pretty much hung up on me. But seasonal film, the guy answered, and I knew he spoke Mandarin. I didn't speak Cantonese, so these other guys I couldn't do this to. But I switched to Mandarin before he could hang up on me, and he invited me over for the day. And I spent the day in the office. We were watching movies, talking about films. And in particular, one thing, he did a Bruceploitation movie called Legend of Bruce Lee, I think it was called. And he showed me part of it, and he said he was pointing out where the stuntman was and where it wasn't. And I'm a huge fan of Bruce Lee, and so I really know how Bruce Lee moves. And he played the scene. He said, "That's the stuntman." I said, "No, that's not the stuntman. That's Bruce Lee." And he went, No, I made the movie. I know." I said, "No, it's not. Sorry, you're wrong." So he called up the editor, and the editor goes, "Yeah, that's Bruce Lee." So,
where was that? Where was that?
In Hong Kong.
What movie though? Like,
I think it was called Legend of Bruce Lee. I think he made that picture. So
so Bruce Lee was in it.
They used some archival footage of Bruce Lee.
Wow, that's really cool.
Yeah, so that impressed him, and I left there, and he said, if I decide to make an American story with Hong Kong martial arts, I'll call you, because that was my pitch to him, was to do an American story with American actors but use Hong Kong action. And then about 6 months later, he called me. I was at work, and he called and said, "Come to Hong Kong. We're going to do it." So that was back in 1984. No, 1983. And then we made the movie in '84, and it was released in '86.
With No Retreat, No Surrender, were you inspired by The Karate Kid?
No, in fact, the Karate Kid had not yet come out when we were working on it.
Oh, really?
So it was just it was sort of my dream was to get coached by the ghost of Bruce Lee, because when I was trained in the martial arts, I had a poster. I don't know if you guys remember it, but the poster of Bruce Lee with the cuts. You know, he had his hands like this, and the cuts on his body from Enter the Dragon. And so that was my inspiration when I was training, was him. And I thought, well, wouldn't it be cool if the ghost of Bruce Lee came and trained you? And so that's where that idea came from.
Okay. Here's a really good question from Antonio. He says, Master Keith, you've been involved in various aspects of film production, from directing to screenwriting. Which role do you find the most rewarding, and tell us why?
Well, it's a good question, Antonio, and happy birthday. I think I enjoy the writing the best, because it's, I'm a writer at heart. Everything that I've done has come from writing. But at the same time, I think the most rewarding part is when the movie's finished, because when I write something, it's all sort of pie in the sky and I can write whatever I want. But when you actually have to make the movie, you face all sort of challenges. And as a producer, basically, it's really just solving problems all day long. You're just solving problems. Nothing ever goes smoothly. So when everything's finished and the movie's done, I think that's the most rewarding part. But the most enjoyable part for me is the writing aspect.
Okay. And this is a great follow-up question also from Antonio. With over 30 scripts to your credit, which one holds the most sentimental value for you, and why?
I think the scripts that I've written, it's probably American Shaolin. I think that it was always one of my dreams to go to the Shaolin Temple to train, and I finally got to do it thanks to NG, the producer and executive producer that I worked with at Seasonal. He had a connection with the abbot of the Shaolin Temple, so they allowed me to go there for a week and train with the monks. So I think American Shaolin has the most sentimental value for me, because I really love everything about the Shaolin Temple, and the idea of an American going there to train was always something that I loved.
And you trained there yourself?
I trained there for a week, just a week. It's not like
what would you say philosophically is the biggest thing you brought away from there?
I think it's philosophically, it's probably the idea of never giving up. There's a chamber in the Shaolin Temple that has depressions of the monks' feet in the stone. And I was able to, I kind of snuck in there. The abbot told me I could do it, but nobody else could go in. And they let me go in there and sort of move around in those steps, and to feel that long-standing tradition, and to see how hard and how hard they worked, and the kind of perseverance. And that's really what has really instructed my life, is to just never give up. I've always thought that I could do anything as long as I tried as hard as I could at.
Love that.
Wow. Oh, this is from what we were talking about earlier, by the way. So Antonio said he would love to paint one of your favorite scenes in your films. You just name it, it would be an honor. So what do you want Antonio to paint?
Well, let me think about that, and then I'll let you know, Antonio. I don't want to say it on the spot, because it might not be the right answer. So let me think about it, and then I'll let you know. Okay, I'll probably let you know through these guys. Okay.
Okay, cool. Sounds great. So we got to talk more. Well, there's so many great films, but No Retreat, No Surrender. That's one of my favorites. That's the one that I watched. Oh man, probably in the mid to late 80s, and that was before Van Damme was Van Damme, of course.
Right.
So how involved were you with the production? Like, were you on set every day?
I was on set every day. I wrote the script, and honestly, I knew nothing about writing a script. When NG said to me, let's write the script. You know how to write a script, right? And I said, oh yeah, sure. Because I was a writer, I figured as soon as I learned the format, I could do it. But what I didn't understand is that writing shortcuts, and the fact that you don't have to write everything you see. So my first draft of No Retreat, No Surrender was 180 pages, and it should have been about 80 pages.
Mhm.
So every night, the night before we got on set, I was up late rewriting the next day's work. And then I was on the set as the translator for Yuenkui, who was the director, who didn't speak any English. So I got to see everything. I got to see why I changed it, why it worked, what didn't work. It was a great film education for me, better than being in a university, because I saw everything that went on and I had to deal with every with every problem and everything from actors to the crew. It was really a great experience for me.
Oh, for sure. And well, let's talk about how Van Damme got involved.
Well, we did in Los Angeles. We did at Raleigh Studios. We did what's called an open call, which is a casting call that anybody's allowed to come to. You don't invite people; everybody can go. And so we were there at Raleigh Studios, seeing all these actors, and I was there the whole time too, because I had to translate for the director and give people instructions and that sort of thing. Not that I knew anything about what I was doing, and we were running out of time. And so the director looked at me, and NG looked at me and said, "Go outside, pick 3 guys that you think could be a good bad guy." So I go outside, and there's this line of people going around the block. And they know I'm from the production. So they're looking at me like, "Oh, please pick me." And I felt really bad because I'm walking by people that are not right for any of the roles that we have.
Mm.
And then I picked 3 guys, and Van Damme's one of the guys. And so we come in, and Van Damme throws a couple kicks, and that was it. They said absolutely right away they know. And we all know that if you see somebody do a couple of moves, you can tell whether they've been trained and whether they're any good. I remember when we were doing King of the Kickboxers, we brought Keith Cook in, Keith Hirabachi Cook, and Billy Blanks in. And as soon as they did 3 or 4 moves, we were like, "Oh, yeah, that's good. That's fine. You don't have to show us anymore. We know you're an expert." But it's often the other way around. Like an actor will come in and say, "Oh, I'm a 5th degree black belt and I'm the farm animal champion of the world." And then we'll say, "Well, all right, show us some kicks." They go, "Oh, I pulled a muscle last night. I really can't move. Or my pants are too tight." So we get a lot of actors that lie about their martial arts background.
You ever see those joke things on YouTube where they show people trying to they're doing an acting and they're looking for somebody to do a martial arts part, and the guy like spins in a circle and falls on his head, or I mean it's ridiculous. Everybody's probably seen those.
Oh, well, we see a lot of people like that because if we're hiring a fighting role, we got to see them move, and often they can't move at all, even though they claim that they can. But actors are kind of taught to do that. They just want to get the role, and once you hire somebody, it's too late. Like a lot of people say they can ride a motorcycle or they can ride a horse or they can do this or that, and you go, okay, you don't doubt them, and then they show up on set and they've never seen a motorcycle before. So.
Wow. Yeah, they do whatever they can to get the role. And maybe they figure, oh, I'll just learn it if I get this thing booked, do a crash course in it, but hopefully not crash during the crash course if it's a motorcycle. Right. But so can you share some of the experience with Van Damme? Because he hears stories about like his control and him possibly hurting people on No Retreat, No Surrender. Did you witness any of that?
Yeah, he really couldn't gauge the need for being close. Like we would explain to him that you didn't have to be close to somebody to make it look realistic, that we were hiding the point of contact with the camera. Mm-hmm. So you didn't have to be close to make it look realistic. And he couldn't really grasp that concept. So he kept hitting people and getting too close. And we kept telling him, don't do that. He hit Tim Baker, who was the father. He played the father's role. And then he knocked out Sugarfoot Cunningham twice during the shooting, and we had to redo it because he broke character and went to help Pete, and so he didn't land, and there was no natural place to cut. So we had to do this. We had to wake Pete up, do the shot again, and then he knocked him out again. So he had a lot of problems with control, mainly because he thought he had to be closer than he needed to be. And some of our people, he was sued because I think he blinded a guy on Cyborg, and so he was sued, and a couple of our guys testified against him.
Yeah, I did a whole video on that guy, that stuntman in from Cyborg, unfortunately. And then when Van Damme became, really popular and famous and got money, at that point, that guy, sued Van Damme because Cyborg was such a low budget movie. He probably figured, well, this sucks, but like this guy don't have any money, so what am I going to sue him for?
Right.
So he sued him years later. So in a lot of ways, you could say, I don't know if you want to take credit for it or not, that you were the one that kind of discovered Van Damme because you picked him out of that crowd along with two other guys, and he got that role. And in a way, it kind of indirectly got him Bloodsport because I remember talking to some of the creators of that, like Mark DeSalle, Frank Dukes, and Sheldon Lettich, I believe, seen No Retreat, No Surrender, and they thought, well, this guy would be perfect to play the Frank Dukes character in the movie. So that was one reason he got it. There were a couple other reasons too, him being like the bad guy in Predator and all that other stuff. But so in a lot of ways, you could say you discovered Van Damme. You're the one that really put him in his first like real movie. So do you take credit for that or not?
No, not really. I mean, I just pulled him out of the line. He had to do it himself, and he's a beautiful kicker. I mean, that's the he's got an interesting personality. Let's say he was a very hard worker when he worked with us. He was willing to do anything. He hurt himself a couple times falling, doing some of the falls himself. So he was really great to work with, other than the control aspect of it. And the decision wasn't mine. I pulled him out of the line, but it was the director and the executive producer that decided to hire him. And then he did a great job in No Retreat, No Surrender. He's very memorable, and he did his signature splits on the ropes. So I can't really take credit for that. It was just a great experience for me.
Mm. Were you surprised at all that he became the big star that he became, or were you more like, yeah, I could see that. That makes sense because I'm sure he impressed you doing No Retreat, No Surrender.
Yeah, he definitely had some star quality to him, and like I said, he's probably one of the most beautiful kickers we've ever seen, and he can still do it. I mean, you look at him today, and he's still throwing kicks like that, and he's in his 60s, I think.
Yeah, I think he's like 62 possibly, but
Yeah,
still very impressive. Yeah,
and
lifetime
he
of
still
training
moves really
martial
well. And
art.
I know you remember that Volvo commercial where
Oh
they're
yeah, people talk about
firing
that
up.
all the time. That thing went viral for a reason.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's amazing. And
Hey, here's
we
another.
had a
Oh,
two-picture contract with him.
oh,
But
you
then
did.
there were some issues. I wasn't really involved in the second movie, No Retreat, No Surrender. I wrote No Retreat, No Surrender 2. I wrote the script, but I didn't get along with the guy that was going to produce it. And then there were a lot of issues with him and with the shooting in Thailand. And so both Kurt McKinney and Jean-Claude Van Damme didn't go to shoot that movie. And I didn't go on set either. And then after that movie came out, I said to the executive producer, NG, I said, "Look, if you want to continue working with that guy, that's fine. I'm not going to work. I'm not going to work with him." And then they didn't work with him and worked with me for the rest of the movies.
Oh, speaking of No Retreat, No Surrender 2, it's so different. Like even if hypothetically Kurt McKinney and Van Damme were in it, it's so different from the first one. Was that supposed to be a sequel, or was it more of like what Don Wilson did with Blood Fist, where it was like it was popular, so they kept making Blood Fist movies, but they have nothing to do with the other ones aside from the title?
Right. Well, it was originally called Raging Thunder, and so it was never supposed to be No Retreat, No Surrender, and neither was the third one. The third one was called Blood Brothers, but because No Retreat, No Surrender was so popular, it just kept getting No Retreat, No Surrender 2, No Retreat, No Surrender 3. I thought for a while every movie I made was going to be called No Retreat, No Surrender.
Yeah,
Maybe I'd
that's
write
funny.
one called No Retreat, No Surrender, Never Again. Uh,
Aren't you actually? I hear a lot of things behind the scenes. Aren't you supposed to be bringing that back? No Retreat, No Surrender.
we're thinking about it. I just had an event in Dusseldorf, Germany, which is like a strange city to have an event like this. But they did two fan screenings of No Retreat, No Surrender, and they were both sold out. 200 people, every seat was sold. They hung around 3 hours afterwards to get autographs from Kurt, and for some reason they wanted my autograph. But it was amazing to see how many people just loved that movie. So we're thinking of doing something, either a reboot or an update, like sort of No Retreat, No Surrender now kind of thing. I don't know. It's definitely interesting. It definitely touched a lot of people's hearts, which I'm really proud of. I mean, I think it got a lot of people into the martial arts.
Who would you have as the main character? Is there somebody you could think of? Maybe not too far away from you on the screen.
Yeah, I think Scott Adkins would be great to play a major role in No Retreat, No Surrender. He's a friend of mine, and he loves No Retreat, No Surrender. So it would be sort of, he attended one of our action film camps. When I was making movies, Keith Vitale and I put on an action film camp to teach people to fight for the movies, because we needed a lot of fighters when we made a movie. And so very often we had to train them on set when they showed up. So we thought we should have a camp that teaches people how to do it, so we can pick the best people from those camps. And I think we hired probably 150 people from the various camps. We did it every year for 20 years. And so Scott came to one of those camps when he was a kid. He was in his teens. Wow. And so, we got to know him back then. I tried to hire him for Blood Moon, but because he's a UK citizen, it was difficult to get him a work visa. But it would be great to work with Scott on something like that.
Oh, for sure. And then
you got to have a place for the Viking samurai, though.
Well,
you got to get them helicopter kicks in there.
Split kick, that would be great.
You got to get Kurt McKinney in there. Do you think you could get Van Damme in the No Retreat, No Surrender?
Well, the thing is, the No Retreat, No Surrender is linked to seasonal film, and there's a bad taste in NG's mouth for Van Damme. Because he broke that contract. We tried to contact him. I talked to him, I don't know, maybe 15 years ago about something, and he just blew us off. So it's not something I think that NG would want to have Van Damme involved. But Kurt definitely would be involved. I was with Kurt at that screening, and he's a great guy. We've been friends since No Retreat, No Surrender. So I for sure have him involved in some way.
Oh,
Can
for
you
sure.
Imagine, David, you and Van Damme doing helicopter kicks in the fight at each other?
No, you don't want to overdo it, overplay it. But what's funny? So when you were in Dusseldorf, that was put on by Sean David, right? The producer of The Last Cemetery.
That's
so
right.
I was out there last summer shooting with them and working with Kurt. Like, it was such a thrill for me because I watched Kurt and Billy Blanks and Cynthia, Matthias Hughes, Muhammad Kesey. I mean, there's so many, like all these guys, Abdel Kesey, who played Attila in one of my favorites, Lionheart. But I was able to work with them and fight in the movie Kumite. And I did do the Van Damme helicopter kick in that film because they wanted to do a lot of throwbacks and homages. They even have some cool, like, No Retreat, No Surrender throwbacks, obviously with Kurt's involvement and everything else. Right. Oh, so, yeah, that was a thrill.
I saw the trailer for Lionfish. It looks really good.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a lot of fun. But, yeah, these movies, man, they've really inspired and changed people's lives. I became a lifetime martial artist since 1993 because of these movies, and I never stopped.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, but I owe so much of my success to the martial arts, to the lessons I learned in the martial arts. So I'm very grateful for it, and I'd love to do another movie that has the same sort of impact as No Retreat, No Surrender, for sure.
Oh, for sure. Oh, here's an interesting question from Antonio. He said, your films often explore the darker side of fame and glory. Can you share a behind-the-scenes moment where the reality of the industry shocked you or challenged your beliefs?
Well, I think that the industry in itself is quite a difficult industry, and it's back then it's a little bit easier, I think, to break in now because you don't have the barriers to entry that used to be. Like when I was starting out. You had to have money to rent a camera, to rent all the lights, to do everything that needed to be done. But now you can make a good quality film with just your iPhone, really. So there's not that barrier to entry. But back then, it was almost like people who got into the industry wanted to make the people that were trying to get into the industry suffer like they did. And I never looked at it that way. I thought that, since I was lucky enough to get into the industry, I should try to make it easier for everybody. Oftentimes, like we'd hire a casting agent, and we'd go and they would bring people in, and they would almost yell at him like, "Yeah, you gotta go quick. Don't waste these people time." And I turned to him and say, "Look, we want to get the best performance out of this person. We want to see how well they perform. We don't want to put them under stress and have them do poorly." So I had to really work with the industry professionals that we had to get them to just be nicer to people, because people in the industry are often so mean to other people. And that really shocked me, because I really think that, you want to pass on the good luck that you've had, not make it harder for other people who are getting in.
Yeah, that makes sense. Oh, here's a good question from El Capi de Ciem. He asks, have you thought of yourself being the lead actor and director of your own martial arts film? Like, has that entered your mind at all? Because I know you're a lifetime martial artist, you have the cameos, but did you ever want to be like the main guy? Because you're writer, producer, obviously.
Well, I think that I'm a little goofy looking, number one, so I don't think it would really work for me to be the lead actor or something. And then I did a little bit of directing when I got my master's in film and screenwriting. One of the things I had to do was direct a short film, and I think that I didn't think I was very good at being a director. I think I'm much better as a producer, and I'm much better behind the scenes. It's like when somebody tells you you have a face for radio. I have a talent for being behind the scenes and not so much being in front of the camera. But it's a good question.
Here's a comment from Shin Batman 84. He says Lauren Avedon is underrated. So he is a great martial artist. I've heard stories, and maybe he developed a reputation that could have affected his career of how he is on set. Like, what was your experience working with Lauren Avedon?
Well, Lauren is an interesting personality. Let's put it that way. I think he's a great martial artist. He looks really good on film, but I think he's. I don't want to I don't want to psychoanalyze anybody, but I think that he was a martial artist, but he was never a champion. And so when he was working with some of the champions, a lot of people, when they feel out of their depth, they pretend that they're better than they are. He's a great martial artist, but I think he always had that sort of sensation where he was working with Keith Vitale, who was a 3-time world champion. He was working with Billy Blanks, who's a 6-time world champion. And, they were super successful as athletes, and he's a great on-screen martial artist. So I think there was some conflict there. We worked with him for 3 movies, so, we had a good bit of success with him.
Okay. Would you consider bringing him back for the No Retreat, No Surrender reboot, or?
Probably not. I think, number one, because he wasn't in the original No Retreat, No Surrender. If we were to remake No Retreat, No Surrender 3, that's a possibility, because it had both Keith, who's one of my best friends in the world. It would have Keith and Lauren, so it would make sense to bring him back in. It wouldn't make any sense to bring him in for the original if we were doing something with the original.
Well, hopefully you can find a part for Matthias Hughes, though. That guy is amazing.
He's a great guy, really a fun guy. I think that we really hit it off. We did an event, 10 years ago in Berlin, and he was there, Don was there, Cynthia was there, Keith was there. It was a great event, and we got to hang out, and I got to know him really well, because I wasn't involved in the casting of No Retreat, No Surrender 2. I knew Cynthia at the time, and I was really pleased that we got her into that, but I didn't get a chance to work with her. I've spent a lot of time with her since, and I think she's wonderful, and so is Matthias. Matthias is a great guy.
Oh, for sure. Oh, here's another cool question from Antonio. He says, as a writer, what techniques do you use to ensure your scripts resonate with both martial arts fighting enthusiasts and the general audiences around the world?
Well, that's an interesting question. I think that you mentioned that Raging Thunder was quite a bit different from No Retreat, No Surrender, and one of the reasons why is that it was originally kind of similar in the storytelling, because the lead actor was this sort of naive guy in my version of the script. But when Raging Thunder was remade by this other producer, they changed Lauren's character and made him sort of a hero from the beginning. And for me, a story has to have an arc. It has to have, the guy starts from somewhere and he ends up in another place. and he ends up in a better place. In the better movies, he ends up in a better place, learns things along the way. And so I think that's one of the things I try to put into all my scripts is that you have somebody that starts from a place, either it's naivete or he's young or he doesn't know very much, and he learns things along the way, and then he becomes a hero. One of the problems I thought with the Raging Thunder movie is that Lawrence started as a hero and had nowhere to go, and so there was no real character development. I think that's the thing that I try to put into every script, that this guy goes through a journey, this guy or girl goes through a journey. Kurt in No Retreat, No Surrender, he starts out as a guy that loves Bruce Lee but has a lot of problems, and then Bruce Lee comes to him and teaches, and he becomes the hero.
Yeah. So you've written 30 scripts. I believe 10 of them were produced. You have a master's in screenwriting. Like, when did you get the master's in screenwriting? At what point in your screenwriting journey?
After we finished American Shaolin, I decided I wanted to go back. I wanted to see if I could break out of the martial arts genre and get into the regular filmmaking genre, which is a hard leap to make, and I wasn't successful in making it at all. But I went back to school to get my master's in on the one hand, to try to just write mainstream movies, but at the same time I wanted to be able to teach. And so I then started teaching after I got my master's. I taught at Towson University in Maryland for a long time, and then now I teach at Webster University here in Switzerland.
Well, what do you teach exactly? Do you teach screenwriting or something else?
Screenwriting, film production. I teach journalism because I've been a journalist for the past 35 years. So I teach journalism, and I also teach like intro to media, that sort of thing. So whatever they need me to teach, I teach.
Oh, that's cool. Oh, here's something.
I started doing some online screenwriting consulting. So somebody is working on an action picture. I work with them to polish the script and to make it better.
Okay, that's cool. I might have to talk to you about that. I have a screenwriting major as well from CSU Northridge, and got a few things in development. But I'll have to pick your brain about a couple things.
There you go. That sounds good. I'm always happy to help.
Cool. Hey, here's a question. I didn't even know this. I didn't even realize this. This guy Adam says, "Why is Van Damme's name in the credits Carl Bresden in No Retreat, No Surrender?"
Well, because there were several different cuts of the movie, and there's several different dubs of the movie as well. So in some versions he's Ivan Krasinski, and in some he's Carl Bresden. So it depends on the cut that you're looking at. If it's the international cut, it might be one or the other.
Okay. Oh,
so there's an extended version that in the U.S. release, there's the subplot of the mafia guys that are taking over. It's not developed as well as in the international cut, and the international cut explains things a little bit better.
Oh, here's a comment. So El Capi DeCM, he said, "I found out there are 9 films under the No Retreat, No Surrender title or the Karate Tiger title."
Well, that's interesting, because I know the Karate Tiger was the European release. The French release was the Le Tigre Rouge, the Red Tiger. And then in other parts of the world, it was No Retreat, No Surrender. But we only did, I think only 3 of my movies were called No Retreat, No Surrender, the first 3. Wow. And then we broke out of that with the next one, which was King of the Kickboxers. So it's interesting that they would use that. But because we didn't name it Karate Tiger, they often would take the Karate Tiger name and put it on another action movie, trying to fool the audience into thinking it was related to the other 3.
Another question from Antonio here. He says, "Your dedication to teaching extends beyond the classroom to include action film camps and martial arts workshops. What inspired you to create these educational platforms?"
Well, good question, Antonio. The action film camp started because we needed so many fighters. Everybody thinks they can be the lead actor, and so they audition for the lead actor, but you really only have one lead actor, and so you need all these other guys that can get beat up. So we needed to hire those guys, and we needed to teach them so we wouldn't waste time on set teaching somebody how to react, because martial artists in general, I mean, we're never taught how to take a hit. were taught how to deliver a hit, but we never taught how to snap our head when we get punched. So we needed to teach people that. And then just in general, I wanted to, as I was explaining before, because I had been treated so badly. I remember once I called this Hollywood company, and I said, I asked for whoever I was trying to talk to, and they said, I think their answer was, why would they want to talk to you? That was what they said to me on the phone, the receptionist. Wow. And I think those people thought they needed to just weed people out. And I always thought that things should be more inclusive. If you've got people that have talent, you want to find people that have talent. So I developed these other martial arts workshops to try to help people that really had talent. And we were lucky enough to find some really talented fighters. And, I've helped people break in and become better actors, and to go on and have a substantial career.
I like that. I really like the way you're talking. The environment can get too sterile. Like, it has to be, here's the process and how you find that person. This is the mold they have to fit in. But I think to find the future Van Damme's, Bruce Lee's, that Jackie Chan's, that special, unique person, you have to be way outside the box. And maybe they're really great in one area and you got to coach them in another, and then it comes together and it becomes brilliant.
Exactly.
I think it's really giving back.
And when you do a casting session, there's so much pressure. Somebody comes in, you guys are familiar with the process. You go in and you're standing in front of 4 or 5 people, and it's usually somebody that's reading very neutrally with you, and you have to emote and you got to be this character, and the person that you're working with gives you nothing. It's just like you walk in and they say, and they read their line and there's no emotion to it, and you got to provide the emotion, and that's not a great environment to get a good performance. So I tried to make that environment as good as comforting as possible. Somebody would come in and I made an effort to really chat them up and find out a little bit about them and get them to relax a little bit before they started. But very often the casting director would say, "Oh, we don't have time for that. Just have them go," and that wasn't the right way to do it, I don't think.
Yeah, I think it's much nicer, better for an actor where you could send in taped auditions these days, because some like I'd say great actors just suck at auditioning, and you get maybe 1 or 2 shots, and it's like, well, that sucks, because I know, the actor would be like, I know I could have done 10 times better. But if you could just send them your taped auditions, which I'm working on one right now, and I have until literally the 26th. So I have like a week to really perfect it, like put it down now and then watch it like tomorrow and like, okay, maybe change it a little bit. So it's much nicer. And I think the COVID pandemic helped a lot as far as, because people couldn't go out and you couldn't like leave your house. Right. So that just kind of, made that more of a thing where you could do these, and you even have to like live in LA, for example.
I think that makes a lot of sense to do it that way. There are some drawbacks to that, though. When we were making King of the Kickboxers, we were looking for the female lead. No, it wasn't. Sorry, it was Blood Moon, not King of the Kickboxers. We were looking for the female lead, and we couldn't find anybody that could fight. And so we put out this call to have people send us. At that time, it was VHS tapes, to send us their taped audition, but a fight audition. So we put these tapes in. We're watching them, and some of them, as you were saying, were just hilariously bad. I mean, it was just so bad, like the things you see on YouTube. But we saw this one girl who was really good, and we hired her over the phone. We brought her in, and then she got on set, and she was horrible. And we were like, "Where's the girl from the tape?" And it turned out, I think she had used a stunt double in her stuff.
Oh, really? Wow. Okay. What a fraud.
So it was.
Did you get the stunt double? Did you find out who?
No, we didn't, because we had to go with her. So we had to actually use a guy from Hong Kong with a wig on to double her for all of the action stuff, because she couldn't do action at all. And, I think that from an acting standpoint, I think what you said makes a lot of sense, that let somebody rehearse it, let somebody do it. But then I would still want to see you in person, because often, there are changes that are made at the last minute, or the director asks for a different take. And so we would often have somebody, even if they were very good, if they did their first take really good, we'd say, okay, let's see, try it this way and see if they could adapt, because you need to be able to adapt if if you're not given exactly what the director wants. So I think that that's a good first step, is that video audition. And then you got to bring them in and see if they can adapt to do something a little bit differently when you ask them to, or something like that. So yeah, I think that's good, because people get a chance to really hone the scene and do a really good job. Because when you step in and you get a side, a page of a scene is called a side. When you get a side and you have to do it, it never happens that way. I mean, on a movie, you get months to do your lines and learn your lines. So having somebody be able to perform is a skill unlike anything that's used in a movie. You never get asked to do it that way.
For sure, for sure. Here's a cool comment, another one from El Capi de CM. I would love to see Kurt McKinney be the lead in a new martial arts film. So crazy enough, he's only really been in 3 martial arts films. So of course, the lead in No Retreat, No Surrender, phenomenal job. And then he was in a film with Cynthia Rothrock in the 90s. And then just more recently, The Last Kumite. And he's got like such an amazing part, big role in that movie. I mean, he's not the lead, but he's definitely one of the most important secondary characters. So I agree that he should be the lead in a new martial arts film, because he's one of those rare guys who is such a great actor, but he's also a great martial artist. And even when I was doing Last Kumite, he was giving me acting tips, which was crazy awesome. And then Billy's like helping me out with some of the fight choreography. Like, these are like 2 veterans I grew up watching. I'm just like soaking this up like a sponge,
Right.
But yeah, Kurt definitely, he's that rarity of great actor. That's why he's done so much work outside the martial arts genre, because he's just a great actor, but he's also a great martial artist. You don't find a lot of guys that are really good.
I would consider Kurt a unicorn in the martial arts industry, because martial arts film industry, because most martial artists are great martial artists, but they can't really act very well.
Mm-hmm.
And then, because we always had that conflict when we went to cast a movie, do we cast the better actor or do we cast the better fighter? And so with Kurt, we found that one person that's a great actor and a great fighter. Another example would be the lead in American Shaolin. He was a really good actor, and he was a above average martial artist, but he was no Billy Blanks. You know what I mean? So very often we would have to choose the better martial artist and work with them on the acting, because frankly, in martial arts movies, we accept worse acting, but we don't accept bad fighting.
For sure.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
You being a really big Bruce Lee fan and having the eye for Bruce Lee, because the movements, nobody else can do them that way. Do you think that you've seen all these movies? I've always been disappointed by Bruce Lee biography, like the movies that do his life, because I think they always go with the acting, because Bruce Lee you have to be a brilliant actor to be Bruce Lee.
Right.
But it always kind of overshadowed because his movements were incredible. The concept behind the movement, it was such a living thing when it was in art in its purity. So
Yes.
Do you think that was a problem, the balance?
Oh, for sure. Like with the Dragon story, or what?
Dragon the Bruce Lee story. Yeah.
Yeah. What was his name? Scott.
Jason Scott Lee.
Jason Scott Lee.
He's a good actor, but as soon as he moved, you were like, yeah, he's not a martial artist.
That was what I thought.
The same is true with like Keanu Reeves in The Matrix. When you see him move, he's a great guy, great actor, but he's not a martial artist. And the martial artists, we looked at that and we're like, yeah, he's not a fighter. But everybody was like, oh, he did such a great job in The Matrix. I'm like, what, are you blind? You can't see that he's not a fighter?
And you know what's interesting? I don't know if you've ever seen these videos where and these are the little things you would have to be able to do to mimic Bruce Lee if you did his life story.
Yeah.
Is when he was actually doing the scenes, he was fainting. Like if you look, there's a whole video of the subtle feints. Like he'd throw a feint before and those are those weird movements you couldn't quite catch, but he did something special.
Yes, exactly. And one of the reasons why I love Bruce Lee so much, and I'm a big fan of Jackie Chan, but not as a martial artist. Jackie Chan's not a classical martial artist, and he's not as beautiful as Bruce Lee was. Bruce Lee's moves were great. He was. I hate to say this because I'm not a big fan of Steven Seagal, but the one character of Steven Seagal is that you had to watch Steven Seagal when he when he was acting in the early movies, he was a little like Bruce Lee in that he drew your attention to him. That's one of the things about Bruce Lee. You couldn't take your eyes off him when he was there.
Somebody said on here one time that Bruce Lee was playing himself. Like, and that's what you saw. That was Bruce Lee on that screen. He wasn't playing a character.
Yeah. It's just nothing is going to ever replace Bruce Lee as the lead in my mind.
Yeah, I like what you said about Seagal's early movies. I mean, he was also one of those guys because he was so natural on screen, and I thought he had good charisma. He brought the Aikido, which we never really seen. So phenomenal performance in Above the Law. And he said he doesn't even say he, qualify that as a martial arts movie. Say, oh, it's not a martial arts movie.
Yeah, I think you're right. That and Above the Law, and he was very good in Under Siege, the first one.
Oh yeah, big time.
He became sort of a caricature of himself, and now it's just a joke. When you see him move, it's always the same move over and over. We had never seen it before when Above the Law came out, but now we've seen it so many times that it's kind of a joke. But
there's actually a recent video of him training Alex Pereira, 2 weight class champion in UFC. Actually, just won a fight in UFC 300 light heavyweight, retained the title. Seagal, actually, that video is on YouTube. It's probably got like 1 million views. He's showing some really nice techniques that Alex and his coaches are utilizing. So I think people just really associate Seagal with the Aikido and clotheslining people because that's such an iconic movie. Doesn't so many films, but no, he's pretty and I've talked to him several times, and people that train with him, they're really shocked like how good he is in person doing stuff.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. I'm a big Seagal fan, but I like to try to, find out more about these people by talking to people who work directly with them.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, here's a great question from Antonio, by the way. How do you define success in your own terms, and how has that definition evolved throughout your career?
That is a good question, Antonio. I think that nothing I really did to try to succeed. I've tried to remain humble throughout my career, and with good reason, because I haven't been that successful. But I think that I was just trying to do my best. In every stage, I tried to do my best. I tried to learn in every case, and I've seen so many people that come and they do their first martial arts movie. In fact, the lead in Superfights, Brandon Gaines, he epitomized the wrong way to approach a role like that. He thought he knew everything, or he pretended to know everything, because often when you come into a new situation, you don't want to feel like you're a novice. You don't want to feel like you don't know anything. So a lot of times people pretend to know more. And I've always approached it that everything for me is a learning experience. And I think I'm successful if I've learned something along the course of whatever it is I do. So I never go into something thinking I'm the best, thinking that I know everything. I go into it to learn things. And I remember we were doing a scene and Brandon was doing a kick, and we were very much sticklers about the excellence of the fight scenes. And so if something didn't work, we did it until it worked. I remember Keith Vitale did a kick. I think he did this one kick 58 times before we got it perfectly.
Oh, wow.
And he was happy to do it 58 times. He was one of the greatest guys to work with. But Brandon, he'd throw a kick and we'd say, oh, it was too high. And he'd turn to the cameraman and say, no, it was perfect. And we're like, no, it wasn't. You got to do it again. And then we'd even show him the tape playback, and he'd go, yeah, that's perfect. And we're like, no.
Wow.
So oftentimes people try to behave like they know what they're doing when they don't. And I've always found it's better to admit that you don't know something, because people are more willing to help you. And by the end of if somebody comes on and they pretend to know more, people don't want to help you because you're not very nice. If somebody would come up to one of these novices and go, you really should do it that way, and they'd be like, yeah, I know more than you do. And it's like, okay, then you can just fail. So I've always tried to approach things from that standpoint, that I'm here to do the best job I can, and also to learn as much as I can, because there's still so much I don't know.
Yeah, it's the wipeout mentality, and the best martial artists, I believe, have that where, they could be a 10th degree black belt grandmaster, but some of them will still have that wipeout mentality because it's almost like the more you learn, the more you realize how little you know,
Yeah,
but you're
that's right.
expanding your knowledge. And then the other people, like you said, they're the know-it-all, and they're never going to go anywhere in life. And who wants to work with them? That's got to be so
Mm.
frustrating for a director,
Oh,
especially,
it
right?
really was. There was a scene in No Retreat, No Surrender where, one of the things that the Hong Kong stunt choreographers, and Yuan Kui was the director, but also the fight choreographer, his goal was to make you look as good as you could look. And so he was working with this martial artist who was a very good martial artist. And he'd say, I want you to throw this kick with your left foot. And the guy would go, oh, I'm better with my right. And Yuan Kui looked at him and said, okay. Then I want you to throw this punch. And he'd go, well, I'd be better with this punch. And he did that 3 or 4 times. And Yuan Kui looked at me and he goes, let this guy direct it. And he walked off the stage.
It's funny what you're saying because Bruce Lee talked about this. He said he had to relearn the martial arts for the movies because he said everything I'm practicing may not be, in a fight this might be applicable, but in on movie screen it just won't have the dramatic effect. And he would spend hours throwing kicks at a screen. They would look
Right.
at stuff, angles, and it's a whole nother art,
Oh, it
a
sure
whole
is.
other
And,
art.
the most effective punch is not very attractive on screen. So you got to
Mhm.
make big sweeping movements when you're on screen. And a lot of martial artists couldn't do that, couldn't adapt. They'd say, I'd never throw a punch that way. And it's like, dude, this is the movies. You got to make sure the audience sees what's coming. Uh, so I think that's an interesting way to do it.
Here's another cool question from Antonio, by the way. He says, as the founder of Action Film Camps and including Scott Atkins, could you share a success story of a graduate who went on to make a significant impact in the film industry?
Well, I think that Scott Atkins is the perfect example of that because he was a
Mhm.
martial artist. He was a kid. He was probably 14 or 15 when he came to the seminar that we did. I believe it was in Atlanta, although I'm not completely sure. And we just fell in love with him. He's a great kid, willing to do anything, and he's still become a really he's still a really humble guy. When you watch him in interviews, he's very humble. He talks about how much he still has to learn, and he hasn't become this guy with a big head. So Scott, I think Scott right now is the best on-screen fighter that's out there. I mean, he's so talented and so gifted at that, and he's a good actor too.
I think he really exhibited that in John Wick 4 because if somebody just seen that film, you would never know that's Scott Atkins. But I mean, for one, he had the fat suit, but just like the
Right.
accent, the mannerisms, just everything about that character. So that really kind of showcased, okay, that's great acting performance because you would never think that's Scott Atkins.
That's right. And I really hope that he gets a chance to have a major role in a big movie, because he's been the lead in a number of movies that, have been successful as a genre movie. But I think he should have a shot at making, a big movie where, he could be the star.
Well, I mean, I would think John Wick 4 would have definitely helped that cause for sure. And that was a huge movie and a great role. Oh, here's a comment. American Shaolin, great movie. Still have my DVD. Who's the lead actor in that, by the way?
Uh, Reese Madigan is the lead.
Whatever happened to that dude? Do you know?
He's made a couple of other movies, just straight movies. He was a classically trained actor, and a good martial artist. And so it was really nice to work with him in American Shaolin. But I think he went on to make a lot of other sort of indie movies that were just straight movies, not action movies.
Okay. Another great question from Antonio. As a storyteller, you've delved into diverse topics ranging from martial arts to luxury lifestyle. Can you share a project or collaboration that challenged you outside your comfort zone?
That's a good question. Because back when I was making movies, we only made about a movie every year and a half. So
Mhm.
I had to do something in between. So I became a journalist. I was a journalist before I went into movies, and I continued on in between. And so I became an expert in a number of different things. I became an expert in watches, which is what I'm working now. I work for a luxury watch manufacturer. I'm the content head of this luxury watch Beauvais. But back when I was making movies, I also became an expert in law enforcement. So I was a contributing editor to a magazine called Law Enforcement Technology. So I would be interviewing a lot. I'm a really good interviewer. So I would ask questions to experts in law enforcement and then write it up. And I think that really pushed me out of my comfort zone because I was interviewing SWAT guys. I was interviewing crime scene cleanup people, and it was all really, really interesting. But it was out of my comfort zone. It wasn't what I was normally knew much about. And then I became kind of an expert in it. So I really enjoyed that aspect of it. And it came together because we'd often hire real police officers to be extras in the movies. And I remember on No Retreat, No Surrender, we hired a SWAT team because there was a scene at an airport where the president was coming in and there were these SWAT guys there. And they were extras in the background and they were standing there and I could hear them. And they're going, yeah, I could hit him in the head from here. And it was like 300 meters away. And they were talking about how they could shoot somebody in the head from where they were standing. And so it was out of my comfort zone because these guys were really doing it. I was writing about it, but I really had no idea of how it would be done. And these guys were, doing it every day of their lives.
Okay. Here's a comment that I guess maybe they were discussing this in the comments section. Shin Batman 84 says, seems like everybody had issues with Roy Haran.
Well,
Is that true? Like, was he difficult?
Roy Haran was the producer of No Retreat, No Surrender 2, and I didn't get along with
that
Roy.
guy. Okay.
And because Roy was the sales guy on No Retreat, No Surrender, he sold the movie and he made some mistake. He passed away recently, so don't really want to speak ill of the dead. Sure. But he didn't believe in No Retreat, No Surrender, and he sold it for he didn't make the greatest deals with No Retreat, No Surrender. It could have been much more successful for seasonal if he had believed in the movie. And then he wanted to be the producer of Raging Thunder, which became No Retreat, No Surrender 2. And, I had some friction with him. And so I stepped away. I wrote the script and then I stepped away and I wasn't involved in it. And then it didn't do, they had some problems, as you know, with Kurt Mckinney and Jean-Claude Van Damme. And they had some problems on the set too. And that's when I said, I said to NG, look, if Roy's going to be involved, I'm not going to be. And he decided to work with me. And Roy, I think Roy mellowed afterwards then. He became an instructor at a university in Hong Kong. And I understand that he was meditating. And so he may have changed a little bit of his personality.
Okay. Hey, here's a fun question because people always speculate about this stuff because they see the guys in the movies obviously do amazing things. It's all scripted and choreographed. And Antonio is asking, of all the martial artists you've worked with throughout your career, who do you think would have the most martial arts ability in a real bar fight?
Wow, that's a very good question. And I'd be interested to hear what your take is on this. But of all the ones that I've worked with, I would probably say Joe Hess, who was he was in No Retreat, No Surrender 3. He was a heavyweight champion of the world. But he's a guy that I wouldn't ever want to mess with. And then I'd also maybe put Billy Blanks up there for that.
Sure.
Billy Blanks would probably be able to. And then Keith Vitale, for sure, I'd want him on my side in a bar fight because he was just supremely confident and a great fighter.
And a world champion. I would say, given this, I've had time to think about this because I've covered this topic before. And I have personal experience with the guy and obviously know a lot more about his background. I would say of all the movie martial arts, and now granted, this guy actually started as a real fighter, Don the Dragon Wilson, because if you look at his background, well, not only is he the 11-time world kickboxing champion, which is insane, but he was also a bouncer. So he's got experience with that. And man, the guy now, even at his age, because I spar with him, I'm just shocked how well he moves. Even everybody in the gym will say this. He's like in his 30s. like his reaction time, like just moving around with him, and obviously he's going easy on me with the offense. I'm just thinking, I know why this guy's 11-time world kickboxing champion. I mean, if this guy's moving like this now, and he says, well, in his prime when he was the best, it was like I think 1984. I think that's when he was fighter of the year, somewhere around that time. I couldn't imagine what he would have been like, 30, 40 years ago, because just experiencing him now, and he's in the gym, basically training every day for hours. So even his endurance is still ridiculous. So,
I
and
never had
his defense, he is so hard to hit. He
I
is
bet.
so hard to tag.
I've watched a lot of his fights, and I've never worked with him, so that's why I didn't put him on my list, because it was a question about who I've worked with. But Don, he's not the prettiest fighter, but he's really effective, and like you said, he just moves so well. He's a bit like Mike Tyson. If you've seen Mike Tyson's early fights, you can't hit Mike Tyson. He's bobbing and weaving, and it's like hitting smoke. And I think Don the Dragon Wilson is the same way.
Yeah, and he's known as the body snatcher with those body shoves. He actually got me really good here once, which I felt for a few days. Then I was kind of hesitant to pop that jab out. I was like, oh man, he cracked me there. So I got a little gun shy.
These guys can still move so well.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing. Brian, what do you think about that question of all the movie martial art dudes? Like, if you had to team up with one of them on the streets, like, I want this guy, he's got to be with me.
That's right.
That is a really question. That's a really good question. I guess I'm just about practicality. Like, I want to know their full training. Like, obviously a Jackie Chan is great on the film, but I would not trust him next to me in a fight. And again, even nothing against just Seagal, but I don't, I've never seen him in a tournament. I've never seen him do any combat level fighting stuff. So it'd have to be somebody that has already achieved something, like we've talked world champion, like Don the Dragon. He's proven it. He's done it. But I'm trying to think somebody who's transitioned from like UFC type stuff. Because if I were to pick somebody, they would have to be the full package. Like Jeet Kune Do says, you got to have all the ranges down. But yeah, I'd have to really think about that one, because I never look at on-stream people as real. I look at them as that's just, movie stuff.
Well, you got Conor McGregor now is in Roadhouse, the new Roadhouse.
That's true.
I haven't seen it yet. So
I would pick him for a street fight, no doubt. And I think he's ferocious. So it wouldn't end with the fist. He's the type who would grab a chair or a bottle or something.
That's right.
Hey, one last question, because I know you had about an hour, Keith. One last question from Antonio. He says, what luxury timepiece or watch would be perfect fit for a black belt? Like, any favorites or recommendations?
Well, that's interesting. I have to say Bove certainly would be one of them, because that's who I work with. But there's another company called Artia. It's Artya. And the guy the owner of the brand is a friend of mine and a black belt. And in fact, we're training tomorrow. We fight about once a week. We spar once a week. He's about my age. So we keep at it. But he made a watch called the Black Belt watch that you had to be a black belt to buy it.
Oh, really?
And I remember I went to the Arnold Classic one year.
Mm-hmm.
And, I was showing this watch to some people. And somebody from Arnold Schwarzenegger's entourage came up and said, Arnold wants to buy one of these watches. And I had to say no, because he's not a black belt. I said, you can't buy it. Well, he said, this is Arnold. I said, yeah, it's Arnold, but he's not a black belt. So he can't buy it. The mistake we made is that most black belts don't have much money. So this was a watch. I think it was retailing for $3,000.
Oh, wow.
$3,000. So nobody could buy it. All the black belts wanted us to give them one for free. So
that's funny. So where can the audience find you, follow you, interact with you? Are you active on social media at all?
Yes, I have. My Instagram is Keith, KEITHS 821. That's my Instagram. So a lot of people send me messages through that or through Facebook. But I get a lot of messages about the movies and people saying how much they love No Retreat, No Surrender. And it really means a lot to me that that people grew up with those movies. When we did that screening in Dusseldorf, at one of the screenings they asked people to raise their hand about how many times they'd seen the movie.
Oh.
And they said, how many people have seen it 10 times? And the whole audience put up their hand. They said 20 times, the whole audience. Then they went to 50 times, and it was about half the audience.
Wow.
Then they went to 100 times, and it was about a quarter of the audience. And when they got up to 400, and there were still people raising their hand. So for a lot of people, it got them through some tough times. They'd start their day watching a scene from No Retreat, No Surrender. And we did we're as you know, we're preparing sort of a reboot or a remake. And we took a look at all the social media, and it turns out that more than 400 million people have seen at least a scene from No Retreat, No Surrender.
Wow.
And just recently, Ryan Gosling was asked on the red carpet of his movie, The Fall Guy, what's his favorite action movie? And he actually said No Retreat, No Surrender, which was really something. If you look on Instagram or on YouTube, it really made me smile because, here's one of the biggest stars, and he credited No Retreat, No Surrender for getting him into the movies, actually.
Wow.
That, he thought anything was possible based on No Retreat, No Surrender. And that's the message that I think that movie and a lot of the work that I've done over the years is really anything's possible if you work as hard at it and you have a passion for it.
And it seems like that's shown through, your belief is so real that it manifested itself in that movie because other people obviously felt that. You never told them that, but It's what you said at the beginning of when you were asked, what you learned from the Shaolin temple, and you portrayed that.
Yeah, no, and that's why
magic.
I'd love to make one more movie, or at least one more movie, to try to, because I think today's movies, they're just too much glitz and too much over the top action and loud, and there's no
disposable.
Real story. Yeah.
They're very disposable. See, it's very interesting with movies like No Retreat, No Surrender, and some of the movies I got back here, like that Bloodsport, Rambo 2. These movies are literally part of people's lives. I mean, they're almost like a best friend in a way. You always kind of go back to it, and I'm not surprised when people raise their hand. How many people seen it 50 times? How many people seen it 100 times? It's literally part of their life. Whereas like movies now, and a lot of it probably has to do with TikTok and everything else, where people have such short attention spans, and they're not going to sit through an hour and a half long movie. They could barely sit through a 10-second video these days. And how many times are they going to watch an hour and a half long movie? It's not going to be a part of their lives. So, one thing about my channel, why I think it became popular, is because the 80s and 90s were a very interesting era. In my opinion, and many people's opinions, those were the best action and martial arts films, bar none.
It was the golden age, really. It was. I mean, we had such great movies that came out, and I think another aspect to that is, and I just thought of this really, is that now today they have access to so much. You're on Netflix, you can watch a different movie every day, but back then they had 5 or 6 or 7 VHS or beta tapes, and that's all they had, so they'd put it in and just watch it. So I think that helped us too, is that in fact they weren't spoiled for choice like people are today.
Definitely. And when I grew up, I remember my dad specifically had on the same VHS cassette Rambo First Blood Part 2 and Rocky 4. And I've seen that, Rambo 2 before I've ever seen Rambo 1. I've seen Rocky 4 before I've ever seen the other ones. But we were limited, because we didn't have cable. So, but those movies were so good, but they would be on all the time. And then I would eventually buy VHS copies of like, Bloodsport and watch that like 100 times, and Lionheart and all those,
I know. When I was young, Enter the Dragon came out, and that was like, it was in the theaters, and it took a long time to get to TV. And I remember taking pictures of the TV screen when it was playing, because I just wanted something to hold on to, because it hadn't yet come out on video. Remember, it used to go movies, then TV, and then it would come out on video.
How many times did you watch Enter the Dragon?
Oh, it easily had to be more than 100 times. I mean,
my father used to get so aggravated. He'd come in, I'd be watching that stupid movie again. I was watching that guy up there, that skinny guy, doing all that stuff.
That's funny. No, I love it.
Keith, let's just get one last question because we always like to get some wisdom. If you could share, Antonio's asking, what advice would you give to your younger self, knowing what you know now about life, career, and personal growth?
I think that's a good question. I think that the advice I would give is to just keep working as hard as you can. I think that I also would give my younger self tell my younger self to enjoy it more. Because in the midst of it all, you're working hard and you're not appreciating so much. And when I look back on it, I think of all the great moments I had, and I remember them. But I also remember trying to rush through those moments to get to the next moment. And I think that if I would tell my younger self one thing, I'd tell it, enjoy where you are, because I was so blessed to have the opportunities that I had for NG to give, a guy from Toledo, Ohio, the chance to make a movie, and have a career in the movies. I'm so appreciative of that, and to be able to work with some of my heroes, like Keith Vitale and Joe Hess and Keith Cook and Billy Blanks and Cynthia Rothrock. To get to know those people, it's like a dream come true, and I wish I had taken a little bit more time to appreciate it. And so I try to tell myself today, I live in Switzerland, one of the most beautiful countries in the world, and so I'm often telling myself, appreciate this beauty, because it's not everybody's life.
It's funny you say that. Now I forget which golf legend. It may have been Ben Hogan or maybe Harvey Pinnock who said something about, golf is like life. You have 18 holes and don't rush through it.
Right.
Enjoy the scenery, enjoy the walk, and also smell the flowers along the way.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to that.
Yeah, that's great. I remind myself of that as well, because all we have is, you might have like a goal, a so-called finish line or something you're trying to get to, and it's almost like you just want to rush and hurry up and get there. But
right.
And who knows, maybe you don't even get there, because you never know what's going to happen in life. And we all know eventually we're not going to have life anymore, unfortunately, at some point. That we do know. But the journey, and me and Brian, we're doing so much, like I would say, adventures together, work-related stuff, just fun-related stuff. And I just have to remind myself, because I have all these big goals that I'm working towards. But even with all the struggles and obstacles, I just have to appreciate that, because I know, like whether you're religious or not, I feel these are tests from God. Maybe you might think it's the universe if somebody's not religious, but it's going to make you appreciate hitting that, eventual like pit stop. See, the goal is just like a pit stop, because there's going to be more along the way, but just to enjoy every step of the journey, appreciate it for what it is. The obstacles are challenging, but it's just going to make the prize so much sweeter along the way. But it's really who you become, during the process, not just like reaching that goal, but it's like the person you become, I think, is important. So definitely.
Often you reach that goal and you're unsatisfied because you were thinking that the goal was going to make you happy, where it's the journey that makes you happy. I'm a motorcyclist, so I do a lot of long distance trips. I'm going to India later this year to do a 2-week tour of Rajasthan, and we did China on my 60th birthday. Okay. And I've really learned from motorcycling that it's all about the journey. Like, you have a goal, but the goal really is the ride. You want to enjoy the ride the whole time, and not when you get to the destination, you're like, oh yeah, well, the ride was the important part. And that's the same is true in life. The goal isn't to finish this or to make this amount of money. If you think that's going to make you happy, it's not. It's the things that happen along the way, and the relationship you make, and the time I spent with you guys. I mean, this has been really fun, and I'd love to do it again. So.
Yeah, it's funny. Again, I go back to golf. This is Ben Hogan, and he said exactly what they asked him. What does it feel like now to be the greatest golfer ever lived? And he said it was the journey, not arriving, that was the most enjoyable.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And we've had moments, Brian. We're not going to share that. We may someday have some of the struggles and obstacles, because I know we have our eye on the prize. But I'm telling you, we're going to look back, and it's going to be some of the funnest moments of some of the hardest challenges that we've already faced. We'll look back, and appreciate like that was living, that was life, that was real. You know,
Yeah.
even though
And
we talk more, but
you tend to bring a lot of joy to everything we do. Even this the angle we've taken, we've laughed and had fun, and I think we're so much older and wiser, and you just get it now. You get it. It's just having fun. Look, it may not work, man. It's like, is that ice thick enough or thin enough to walk? You walk and you go in, you get wet,
Right.
but you laugh that you did it, and you said, "Well, it wasn't a good idea, but we had fun doing it."
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, Keith, thank you so much for joining. And like you had mentioned, you know, coming back on again later in the future, we'd love to have you on. This was a great discussion. And I mean, there's so many films we didn't even like discuss. We got to talk about more of that, just life in general with you in the future.
Yeah, I'd love to. So let me know when you want. I'm available anytime. It's really fun for me to relive some of the stuff that I went through when making the movies, because that was really a wonderful time of my life, and now is still a wonderful time of my life. So I'd really appreciate the time I spent with you guys. Where are you all based?
I'm in the Midwest. I'm in Indiana, though I travel a lot. I'll be in California, Florida, and Philadelphia over the next month. And then Brian, is in Philly. I spent a lot of time with him out in Philly.
You're almost a Philadelphian now, man. You're out here so
I'm kind
much.
of almost like, I know so many people now through a lot of your connections and also through my channel, which I do a lot of networking. And yeah, so I mean, I feel like I'm almost at home in Philly sometimes.
Soon we'll have, and we'll tell the joke one day, people will understand, but we'll have the mushroom house pretty soon.
Yes. We'll talk more about that in the future.
I lived for several decades in Lancaster County, so I'm an Eagles fan, so a big Eagles fan, and I love living.
You out there with the Amish?
That's right.
I'm gonna go to the Amish market now. You just made me think I'm right up the street from it. That's it. You gave me an idea.
But anytime you guys get over to Switzerland, you let me know and we'll get together for sure.
Oh, that'd be great. That's awesome.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, let's set something up. I'd love to do another one. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Keith. Thanks, Brian, and thank you, audience, for tuning in.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Pleasure to meet you guys.
Take care.
Thank you.
Appreciate y'all.
All right, see ya.